It was a typical late shift at Wendy's, the fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows across the empty dining area. The hum of the fryers and the occasional beep of the drive-through signaled the end of another monotonous evening. Little did I know, this night would be different. The bell above the door chimed, announcing the arrival of a regular customer, or rather, a regular problem. His presence always brought a wave of discomfort, his eyes darting around suspiciously as if he carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. "Hey, can you help me with this?" His voice was sharp, cutting through the quiet. He thrust a prepaid phone card towards me, the plastic crinkling in his sweaty grip. I glanced at the card, trying to maintain my professional composure despite the sinking feeling in my gut. "I'm sorry, sir, but I can't help with phone cards. You might want to check with the store where you bought it." His demeanor shifted instantly. "What do you mean you can't help? You guys sold this to me, it should work." His tone grew louder, drawing the attention of a few lingering customers. "I understand your frustration, but there's nothing I can do here. Maybe I can get my manager." Before I could finish, he slammed his fist on the counter, causing a few napkin dispensers to rattle. "I want to speak to someone who knows what they're doing." His face was red, veins bulging in his neck as he leaned in closer. My heart raced as I glanced towards the manager's office, hoping for some backup. Instead, I saw him busy with paperwork, oblivious to the escalating situation at the front. "I'm sorry, sir. Let me get my manager for you," I managed to say, my voice trembling slightly. I hurried towards the office, praying that he would intervene. As I approached, the manager finally looked up, annoyance evident on his face. "What's the problem now?" he muttered, more to himself than to me. "He's upset about a phone card," I whispered urgently, hoping he'd take charge. But instead of addressing the customer, the manager rolled his eyes and sighed. "Just give him a refund or something. Make him go away." My heart sank. I felt utterly unsupported, trapped between an aggressive customer and a disinterested manager. Taking a deep breath, I turned back to face the customer, knowing that this night was far from over. Another late shift at Wendy's, and the memory of the previous encounter with the aggressive customer still lingered like a dark cloud over me. Every chime of the doorbell made me jump, half expecting to see his imposing figure stepping through again. It was a quiet night, or so I thought, until he returned. His entrance was as unnerving as before, the door swinging open with a force that seemed deliberate, as if announcing his presence with authority. I caught his gaze immediately, those eyes fixed on me with a chilling intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. He didn't approach the counter right away. Instead, he stood there staring, as if challenging me to look away first. My hands trembled as I tried to focus on my tasks, avoiding his piercing stare whenever I could. The routine motions of serving customers became a mechanical dance, my mind racing with scenarios of what he might do next. The minutes stretched into hours, each passing second filled with a mounting sense of dread. I could feel his presence like a weight on my shoulders, his erratic behavior becoming more pronounced with every passing moment. He paced the dining area, occasionally glancing back at me with that same unsettling glare. I did my best to stay busy behind the counter, avoiding eye contact and praying silently for the end of my shift to come soon. As closing time approached, I breathed a sigh of relief, hoping he would leave without incident. Yet, as if sensing my relief, he approached the counter once more, his expression unreadable, yet filled with a menacing undertone. "I need to talk to you," he muttered, his voice low but carrying a dangerous edge. Panic surged through me, my mind racing with fear. Without a moment's hesitation, I gestured towards the manager's office, desperately hoping for some form of backup this time. But as I glanced towards the office door, my heart sank once more. The manager was nowhere in sight, perhaps already gone for the night or deliberately avoiding the impending confrontation. With a sinking feeling, I faced the customer once more, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry, sir, but I can't help you. Please, I need to close up now." His response was a chilling silence, his gaze unwavering. For a moment that stretched into eternity, we stood there, locked in a silent battle of wills. Then, without another word, he turned and left, the door closing behind him with a finality that left me trembling in his wake. I slumped against the counter, my hands shaking as I struggled to regain my composure. The night dragged on, each sound magnified in the empty restaurant. a stark reminder of the unsettling encounter that had just unfolded. As I finally locked the doors and prepared to leave, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over, that the shadow of his presence would linger long after the lights had dimmed and the last customer had gone home. The next day, I mustered up the courage to report the unsettling events to the manager's office at Wendy's. As I entered, my heart pounded with a mixture of fear and determination. This needed to be addressed for my safety and for the sake of everyone working there. "Hey, I need to talk to you about something," I started, trying to keep my voice steady despite the nerves. The manager looked up from his paperwork, his expression a mix of annoyance and indifference. "What now?" he sighed, clearly not in the mood for another conversation. "It's about that customer from last night," I began, my words stumbling over each other in my rush to explain. "He came back, and his behavior was really aggressive. I'm worried it might escalate." For a moment, there was silence. I could feel his gaze scrutinizing me, weighing my words with an unsettling detachment. "Look, I don't have time for this," he finally replied, waving a dismissive hand. "Just do your job and ignore him if he comes back." My heart sank. The disbelief and frustration washed over me like a wave. Here I was, trying to voice legitimate concerns about my safety, only to be met with indifference and dismissal. "But what if—" I started, only to be cut off by his impatient tone. "Just drop it, okay? We've got enough to deal with without your drama," he snapped, turning back to his paperwork as if the matter was closed. I stood there, speechless and defeated. It was clear that I couldn't rely on the manager for support, let alone understanding. With a heavy heart, I nodded silently and turned to leave, my mind racing with a newfound resolve. From that moment on, I made a pact with myself. I would avoid that customer at all costs. Whether it meant hiding in the back during his visits or finding excuses to stay out of sight, I would do whatever it took to protect myself from his unpredictable presence. As I returned to my post behind the counter, a sense of unease settled in the pit of my stomach. The shadows cast by the fluorescent lights seemed darker now, a constant reminder of the unsettling encounter and the harsh reality of feeling unsupported in a place that should have been safe. It was a bustling evening at Wendy's, the usual rush of orders and the din of conversations filling the air. Despite the busy atmosphere, I couldn't shake the lingering fear from the previous encounters with the aggressive customer. Each time the door chimed, my heart skipped a beat, dreading the moment he might walk in again. And then, just as I feared, he appeared. I caught a glimpse of him entering the restaurant, his presence like a dark cloud descending upon me. Panic seized me as I saw him head straight for the counter where I stood, frozen in place. I busied myself with wiping down the counter, avoiding eye contact as best as I could, hoping he would just order and leave. But he had other plans. He stood there, unmoving, his eyes fixed on me with an unsettling intensity that sent a chill down my spine. The noise around us seemed to fade into the background, leaving only the sound of my own rapid heartbeat echoing in my ears. "I need to talk to you," he finally said, his voice low and filled with an undercurrent of menace. I swallowed hard, my mouth suddenly dry. "I'm sorry, sir, but I'm busy right now," I managed to reply, my voice barely above a whisper. He didn't move. Instead, he leaned closer, his presence invading my personal space. "You can't ignore me forever," he said, his tone laced with a chilling determination. Fear coursed through me like a tidal wave. Without another word, I turned and fled, seeking refuge in the relative safety of the kitchen. I could hear him behind me, his footsteps following like an ominous echo. Inside the kitchen, I leaned against the wall, trying to steady my trembling hands. How had it come to this? Why was I being subjected to this harassment, with no one willing to help or even acknowledge the danger I felt? Minutes stretched into eternity as I waited, listening for any sign that he had left. Eventually, the kitchen manager approached, concern etched on his face as he saw my distress. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice gentle yet filled with genuine worry. I nodded weakly, unable to find the words to explain. It was clear that I couldn't stay here any longer. Something had to change, and soon, before things escalated even further. As the manager ushered me to a quieter area to collect myself, I made a silent vow. I would find a way to end this nightmare, once and for all. I arrived home after another grueling shift at Wendy's, the weight of the recent harassment heavier than ever on my mind. The safety of my workplace had been shattered, replaced by a constant fear of encountering that customer again. As I closed the door behind me, I leaned against it, letting out a deep sigh. Sitting down at the kitchen table, I reflected on everything that had happened. The dismissive attitude of the manager, the escalating behavior of the customer, it all seemed like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. But I knew I couldn't continue like this. I needed to find a solution, a way to reclaim my sense of safety and control. I pulled out my phone and began researching options for dealing with harassment in the workplace. Articles and resources popped up, each offering advice and guidelines on what to do in situations like mine. From documenting incidents to seeking legal assistance, there were steps I could take to protect myself. But amidst the overwhelming information, one thing stood out: the importance of reaching out for help. I considered talking to my co-workers, some of whom had witnessed the customer's behavior firsthand. Perhaps they could offer support or share their own experiences dealing with difficult customers. Another option was confiding in friends outside of work. Their perspective might offer clarity or insights I hadn't considered. It was daunting to think about sharing such a personal and troubling experience, but I knew I couldn't face this alone. As I scrolled through my contacts, hesitation crept in. Would they understand? Would they be able to offer practical advice or simply lend an empathetic ear? The uncertainty gnawed at me, but I knew I had to take the first step. With a deep breath, I dialed a familiar number and waited anxiously for the person on the other end to pick up. This was my chance to break the silence, to seek the support I desperately needed in navigating this ordeal. Whatever came next, I was determined to face it head-on, armed with the knowledge that I didn't have to endure this alone. It was a quiet afternoon at Wendy's, the lull in customers offering a brief respite from the usual chaos. Little did I know that calm would soon be shattered by an unexpected confrontation. As I stepped outside for a breath of fresh air, I noticed him standing near the parking lot, his presence like a dark shadow against the bright sunlight. Panic gripped me instantly, my heart pounding in my chest as I realized there was nowhere to hide. He approached me with purposeful strides, his expression a mix of anger and determination. "You think you can avoid me forever?" he spat, his voice cutting through the silence. My mind raced, searching desperately for a way out of this escalating situation. "Please, just leave me alone," I managed to stammer, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to appear composed. He laughed, a harsh sound that sent a shiver down my spine. "You can't ignore me," he growled, stepping closer until I could feel his hot breath on my face. Fear threatened to overwhelm me, but I knew I couldn't back down. Summoning all the courage I had left, I called out for help, hoping against hope that someone would hear me. To my relief, a co-worker emerged from the restaurant, drawn by the commotion. "Is everything okay?" they asked, their voice filled with concern as they approached. Before the customer could respond, I explained the situation, my words tumbling out in a rush. The co-worker's presence provided a much-needed lifeline, a reassuring reminder that I wasn't alone in facing this ordeal. Seeing that he was outnumbered, the customer finally backed off, his expression twisting with frustration as he turned and stormed away. Relief washed over me like a wave, my knees trembling with the weight of what had just transpired. As my co-worker escorted me back inside, I couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude. In that moment of confrontation, I had learned a valuable lesson: that seeking help and speaking out were not signs of weakness, but acts of strength in the face of adversity. With newfound resolve, I vowed to continue taking steps to protect myself, knowing that I had allies by my side who would support me through whatever challenges lay ahead. I found myself sitting nervously in the manager's office at Wendy's, the weight of recent events heavy on my mind. This meeting was long overdue, a culmination of fear and frustration finally reaching a tipping point. The manager glanced up from his paperwork, his expression more serious than I had ever seen before. "So, tell me what happened," he said, his voice devoid of its usual dismissiveness. Taking a deep breath, I recounted the confrontation in the parking lot, the fear, the verbal threats, and the overwhelming sense of vulnerability. With each word, I could feel the manager's demeanor shift, his gaze hardening with each detail. "I've been dealing with this for weeks," I explained, my voice steady despite the lingering anxiety. "I've tried to handle it on my own, but I can't do this anymore. It's affecting my ability to work safely." There was a moment of silence as the manager processed my words, the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. Finally, he spoke, his tone tinged with a rare hint of remorse. "I'm sorry you had to go through that," he said quietly, his eyes meeting mine with a newfound sincerity. "I should have taken your concerns more seriously from the beginning." As we talked, a plan began to form. We discussed safety measures, increased security presence, protocols for handling difficult customers, and a commitment to intervening if the customer returned. It was a relief to finally feel heard, to know that steps were being taken to protect not just me, but everyone working at the restaurant. By the end of the meeting, I felt a sense of cautious optimism. While the scars of those encounters would take time to heal, I knew that I wasn't alone anymore. With the manager's promise of support and the reassurance of safety measures in place, I could finally start to imagine a future where work didn't come with a constant fear of the unknown. Leaving the office, I couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but at least now I knew I had taken a crucial step towards reclaiming my sense of security and peace of mind. One afternoon, as I worked behind the counter, a familiar figure approached the entrance. A knot formed in my stomach as I recognized the aggressive customer. My breath caught in my throat, my heart racing with a mix of relief and lingering anxiety. This time, however, the scene unfolded differently. The customer hesitated at the door, glancing around warily. It was clear that the increased security measures had not gone unnoticed. He lingered for a moment, as if weighing his options, before finally turning and walking away. Relief washed over me like a wave, mingled with a cautious optimism. The heightened surveillance and precautions had made a difference, providing a layer of protection that hadn't been there before. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to hope that maybe, just maybe, things were beginning to change for the better. But despite the newfound sense of safety, I remained vigilant. The scars of those encounters were still fresh, a constant reminder of the vulnerability that had defined my recent experiences. I knew better than to let my guard down completely, understanding that vigilance was now a part of my daily routine. As I continued my shift, I couldn't help but glance towards the security cameras periodically, their presence a reassurance in the face of uncertainty. The road ahead would still be challenging, but with each passing day I felt a little stronger, a little more empowered by the knowledge that steps had been taken to protect me and my co-workers. Leaving work that evening, I reflected on the events of the day with a sense of cautious optimism. The journey towards healing would be a gradual one, but I knew that I wasn't alone anymore. With the support of increased security and the resilience forged through adversity, I was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, one step at a time. As I walked into Wendy's for my last shift, a mix of emotions swirled inside me. It was a bittersweet moment, the end of a chapter marked by fear and uncertainty, yet tinged with a sense of relief and closure. Throughout the shift, I couldn't help but glance nervously towards the entrance, half expecting the familiar figure to appear once more. But the hours passed without incident. The customer didn't return. Relief washed over me like a wave, mingled with a lingering sense of anxiety. Had he moved on, or was this just a temporary reprieve? The questions lingered in the back of my mind, reminders of the scars left behind by those unsettling encounters. As I closed up shop for the last time, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey I had been through. From fear and helplessness to resilience and determination, each step had been a testament to my strength and courage. I had faced adversity head-on, refusing to let fear dictate my future. Leaving Wendy's that day, I carried with me a sense of closure. The ordeal of harassment was finally behind me, a chapter of my life that I could now close with gratitude for the lessons learned and the support received. Looking forward, I felt a renewed sense of hope and optimism. The road ahead would still have its challenges, but I knew that I was stronger for having faced this ordeal. With a deep breath, I took my first steps towards a future where fear would no longer hold sway, where I could move forward with confidence and determination. The journey had been long and arduous, but as I walked away from Wendy's for the last time, I knew that I was leaving behind more than just a job. I was leaving behind a chapter of my life that had tested me in ways I never imagined and emerged stronger because of it.